Good morning, students. Welcome to our December virtual career cafe. I'm Amy Good from the Community Education Center for Elk and Cameron counties, and I'll be your moderator for today. We're recording this session and making it available for other students to view later. For today's session, we're going to be going into the woods and learning about careers in the forest. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Matt Schenck from DCNR. He is an environmental educator. And we also have Joe Kellert, also from DCNR, a district forester. So welcome you both, and thanks for joining us today. We'll start off with Joe, if you want to share your background and journey in this field and what inspired you to this career choice.
Yep. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Kellert. As Amy pointed out, I'm a district forester here on the Elk State Forest. I actually got my start back when I was just young, growing up in Potter County. I actually was born and raised in Coudersport in Potter County. I was involved in scouts. My family, we camped all the time. We were in the outdoors all the time. My backyard was home. We didn't have computers. I didn't have a television until I was about 12 years old in my house. So we found our adventures by using our imaginations and just getting out of the outdoors. That's where I started to find my passion and love for the outdoors. That was solidified through scouting. We were introduced to foresters, both in the private sector with sawmills as well as state foresters. We were also, when we were in scouts, we were involved with, introduced to Pennsylvania game wardens, fish wardens. So my passion really grew from that. From there, so I'm kind of the exception. I pretty much knew from when I was about 8 or 10 years old what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I was lucky enough to do that. As far as my schooling and background, I graduated Coudersport Senior High School. I went off for my 2-year associate's degree at Mont Alto University, which is a branch campus of Penn State down in the southern part of Pennsylvania. After my 2-year degree down there, I went back to the University Park in Center County, Penn State, and got my 4-year degree in forest management. From there, while I was in school, I should mention that I was able to get internships at the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry office up in Coudersport. I had 3 internships up there during the summer, and one summer I actually went over and learned to log. So I was a logger for a summer. I wanted to see how the private industry worked. So logging and working in a small family sawmill down in the southern part of Pennsylvania. From there, I was able to acquire a forest technician degree. That's our entry-level forest management position here with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry. That was down in Perry County, Juniata County, down just above Harrisburg area. From there, I went down to what we call central office in Harrisburg. I went down there for about a year as a forest program specialist in fire prevention. I also, from that position, I went into recreation for about a year and a half into our recreation division. And then I was lucky enough to get back up here on the Elk State Forest, kind of in the backyard as an assistant district forester with the Elk State Forest. From that position, I held that about 15 years, and now I'm in my current role as the district forester for the Elk State Forest. So that's just a little bit of background. I don't want to take all Matt's time.
Wow, that's a lot of you have a lot of experience, but it's great. It shows the students that there's lots of opportunities that you can jump around to and transfer to. So Matt, same question to you if you want to tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, my name is Matt Schenck. I'm the environmental education specialist at Cinemahoning State Park, which straddles the line between Cameron and Potter County along Route 872. First work is Cinemahoning Creek. I have a similar story to Joe. I grew up in the Pennsylvania wilds, even though it wasn't technically designated until I was in high school. So I was born and raised in Clinton County, grew up around Lock Haven, and I was introduced to the outdoors at a very young age. My family camped a lot. I hunted and fished with my dad and my grandfathers. So I had an introduction to the outdoors, and it was something that I was really passionate about. I initially attended Lock Haven University in pursuit of a degree in secondary education. I wanted to be a high school teacher. But while I was in college, I was sort of keyed into the idea that I could take my passion for the outdoors and teach people about that, which I thought was interesting and sounded really fun. And it was really fun while I was in college. So I decided to switch my major to recreation management. And I specifically focused in outdoor management and outdoor and environmental education. When I got out of my 4-year bachelor's degree program at Lock Haven, I had already done 2 internships. So like Joe, I had the opportunity to get field experience while I was in school. So I did one 3-month internship in Central Colorado, where I worked for the United States Forest Service. I was visitor information services. So I ran the front desk at a national forest office, selling fuel wood permits and helping people find hiking trails, and just introducing people to public lands and how to utilize them. Then I also completed an 8-month internship at Montour Preserve, which is a private preserve and nature center, environmental education center in Montour County, Pennsylvania. And I had the opportunity to do a lot more programming there, work with school-aged children, doing field trips, and then doing public programs there as well. I left Montour Preserve and continued to pursue school programming. So I was a residential environmental educator for 2 school years in Georgia. I worked for Georgia 4-H. So we would have schools that would come into the center I worked at for 2 or 3 day stays, and we would work with the students doing programs on outdoor recreations like canoeing, hiking, and then science-based programming. So studying ecology, different types of animals. And along with that, I had the opportunity to work with live animals. So animal husbandry and animal care. It wasn't quite like a zoo. The animals weren't on display. They lived in the back, and then they would come out for programs. But I worked with animals like great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, something like 15 different types of snakes, and really had the opportunity to grow my experience as a teacher and working with children. From that position, I ended up leaving to pursue a year-round position in Rhode Island, where I worked at a private nonprofit wildlife refuge as an environmental educator, and specifically, I was a summer camp director. So working with children ages 3.5 to 15, and I had seasonal staff that would come in and teach the programming there. And it was my job to set up the summer camp so that kids could have experiences in the outdoors and learn to really grow and love the outdoors, and specifically to love the Norman Bird Sanctuary, which is the site where the camp took place. So I had a lot of opportunity to sort of move around and do a lot of different things in the field. And ultimately, that led me back to Pennsylvania about 3 years ago when I started working with DCNR as an educator. And I've been in my current role at Cinemahoning here for about 8 months now, which has been really, really great to be close to where I grew up and in an area that I really love, with all of the experience that I had getting here, sort of as tools that I have to utilize for programs here. So.
Wow. You guys have really been all over the place. So that's, that's something that there are some kids that want to travel. So, showing that there's opportunities in this industry for that, that's really great. So, Matt, while I have you, it sounds like there's a lot of different career paths in your field. So, are there any specialized areas that students may not know about, that you want to share?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different types of environmental education, environmental educators. So I'll start off by saying that anybody who teaches professionally people about the environment could be considered an environmental educator. So that could be a classroom teacher that teaches natural sciences, even agricultural sciences. There's also My path is what's called non-traditional educators, which sort of feels like a funny term, but people who teach outside of the classroom. So my classroom, I do have a classroom here at Cinemahoning, an indoor classroom, but typically I'm teaching people on the trails or out on the lake here. So my classroom is much different than a traditional classroom teacher. So either of those directions you could go with. There's also an increasing, I'll say, focus on outdoor recreation. So teaching people about the benefits of just being outside and engaging in healthy activities outside that's really good for people. So when I got into the field, that wasn't as much of a thing. It was more like you're going to teach people and children about science and science concepts. And it's slowly been building, and especially with DCNR, we have a new Bureau of Outdoor Recreation now. So I actually have initiatives to teach people about outdoor recreation activities, which is awesome. I mean, you get to teach kayaking and hiking and all kinds of other fun things, and watch people, learn to engage with state parks and how to, stay healthy and utilize the resources that we have here. So I'd say don't sleep on outdoor recreation. If you love, hunting, fishing, kayaking, that type of thing, you can have a career on that, focuses on those things that helps other people learn to love them too. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. There has definitely over the last couple of years been an increase in recreation and health and fitness outdoors in the forest. So thank you for mentioning that. Joe, how about in your field? Oh, you're muted. Oh, Joe, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I'm back, I'm sorry. So I mentioned at the beginning, forest technician is kind of our entry level for the professional side of the office, I would say. So forest technicians actually implement the prescriptions for the actual timber harvest that the management foresters will prescribe. So they'll write up what type of treatment they want. That treatment may include wildlife habitat. It may incorporate different tree species they're trying to target, conifer species versus deciduous or a mix of both. The prescriptions would be like an entry level or a shelter woodcut where they only take some of the trees out. What that does is allow the forest floor to get some more sunlight to get the regeneration going, or the younger trees, so that we can replace that forest over the long term. Some of the careers that we have, I mentioned forest technician, management forester. We also have fire foresters. Fire foresters are rather new within Pennsylvania. These individuals actually help with the suppression, prevention, and then the prescription of fire on the ground in the sense of prescribed fires. So we're doing a lot more with fire. Before Smokey Bear, we've all heard of him. If you've come up through the grade schools, essentially how to suppress wildfires and prevent wildfires. Well, fire is a tool. We've learned a lot about that. So we're now putting it on the landscape in a prescription manner to be able to help us manage the forest better. So communication, we have communication positions down in our central office. We have EESs like Matt is, where we're actually, the Bureau of Forestry hasn't been doing as much in the education as Parks has been, but we're starting to dabble in that in different areas. Matt mentioned recreation is huge. One of the big things, he mentioned the big push for recreation right now. One of the things that we're seeing is there's not a lot of individuals out there that have the actual training to put trails in place properly. So the design, the development, the implementation of those trails that maybe Matt's leading people out to see. That goes for trails on the ground for hikers, for bikers, for ADA accessible trails. We're starting to get into that, where we're trying to open the forest up to more individuals that may have disabilities, to get them out in the environment. As Matt pointed out, nature has many healing principles: the quiet, the solitude, and just getting back to nature as a whole. We have accountants down in our central office. We have geologists in our central office. We have biologists. We have botanists. Anything that pretty much has to do with the outdoors, the environment, or the ecosystem, we have that within our DCNR or the Bureau of Forestry, and then in parks as well. We actually have law enforcement. State Parks has a ranger program. Forestry has a ranger program to carry out our rules and regulations to make sure things are being taken care of. So I'd say forestry, I've always said we're kind of generalists. We have to know a little bit about everything, whether it's forests, waters, streams, soils, air. Air's big now with global warming and stuff, and CO2 emissions, and how the forests actually help us with that. So I guess you could say, like I said, we're the generalists. So if you're looking for a career in the outdoors and ecological systems, forestry and/or parks would be great.
Okay. So since I have you, Joe, what does a typical day, look like for you? What are your tasks? Maybe some of your challenges that you face every day?
So I guess I'll start with my current role as a district forester. I answer the phone and a lot of emails. I deal a lot with the publics, the communities, user groups, and what their needs are. As far as the communities, working with the communities to help, tie the forests in with the communities. How can they leverage the forest for tourism, to bring economics back into their starving communities, especially in the north central part of the state. Some of the big industries that we've typically relied on are kind of dying off, but now we're trying to tap into the recreational industry and tourist industry. So that's one of the bigger things that we deal with, or at least I deal with on a daily basis. My staff, it's composed of 2 assistant district foresters. One's in charge of our maintenance and operations. That individual deals with our trails, our roads, that type of thing, our infrastructure as far as our wildlife viewing areas. And then we have another assistant district forester that's pretty much in charge of the resources. So he deals specifically with habitat, our foresters and forest technicians that deal with timber sales, and the like. We deal with conservation districts. We work with conservation districts for stream improvement projects, as well as the Fish and Boat Commission. The elk herd is huge in our district. It's pretty much where it's got its foothold now. So we work directly with the Pennsylvania Game Commission and habitat improvement, food plots. We might do some cuttings specifically for the elk herd. They also use the state forest to do some of the research monitoring. Currently, we have snowshoe hare they're researching. They're also researching the elk and white-tailed deer, as well as wild turkey. And new that they're talking about doing is the American marten, possibly reintroducing them in some point in time. As far as our maintenance and trades, I don't want to leave them out. We have maintenance and trades where we have equipment operators. So maybe you're not looking directly for something specific to forestry or even the park, but the park side has some maintenance and trades, but they take care of our roads, our trails, our bridges, that type of infrastructure. So we have positions in those fields as well.
But there's lots of opportunities, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Sky's the limit. I mean, it's whatever you can dream, the opportunities are here.
Okay. Matt, how about you? What's your day look like?
So my position is very diverse. So I'll start by saying that no 2 days for me look the same. So there's a lot of different components that could fit into a single day. But I'll just go through like this morning. Typically I come in, I take my park vehicle and I'll drive through the park and just see what's going on. So I usually head down to the lake, check and see if there's anything interesting down there. And then I spent probably half an hour today with our spotting scope, our cell phone adapter, taking videos of elk laying in a field to make social media posts about elk biology. Specifically, I was trying to capture them moving their ears back and forth so that I could do a post about directional hearing. So I'll put all that stuff together in a Facebook post later on. So that's part of my job. Typically, on any given day, I'm expected to talk to somebody in the general public in one way, shape, or form. So during the wintertime, we don't get as much traffic in the wildlife center. So for today, that's what I'm doing right now. This is considered my programming for today. So talking with you about working for DCNR, working with state parks. But I also answer questions pretty much constantly at the wildlife center. People come in, they want to know about finding elk, finding deer, finding bear. What's this plant I saw? Do you know what this weird bird is? How do I get these weeds to stop growing in my yard? So I answer a lot of different questions like that. Generally, that's the most consistent thing about my job, is that I'm always talking to people in the park. So that's a huge component of it. Other things that I might do, work with community partners, like Joe said, different conservation districts, mainly Cameron and Potter County, because those are the two counties that my park is actually in, to coordinate what they're doing. So if they're doing stream improvement in the park, I might go out and check that out, or we might work collectively with students that are coming here from a school. I'm also in charge of applying for grant funding for different pieces of equipment. So like I talked about, we have spotting scopes, binoculars, books. So I put in all the requests for the funding for those things. And then I maintain all of that stuff here at the park as well. And then I plan and produce all the programming with another educator who works seasonally here. So right now, at the end of the year, I'm working on putting together a program plan that says what we're going to try to accomplish next year. So that's a big part of what I'm working on in December. The summertime, my days are dominated by programming and talking to the public. I typically don't have time to do a whole lot else then. I might do 2 or 3 programs a day, or spend all day in a single program. So summer is very busy with the campgrounds, constantly talking with people. Winter's a little slower. That's when I do some of that back end stuff, like Joe said, answering emails, answering the phone when it needs to be, and planning programs for the busier season. But I also get to do a lot of really fun stuff. So the Game Commission, they trap elk and collar elk in the park. So when Jeremy, the elk biologist, comes out to do that, I get to go out with them, participate and help with things like that. I work with the WCOs in the Game Commission to try to get trap bears when they're doing their bear trapping program brought into the park so people can see them. So I get to do a lot of the fun stuff in the park, which is great. You know, it's a very adventurous job, and sometimes you don't even know what you're going to get into when you walk in the door.
Sounds like you have a very social job. It takes a person, who wants to be around people.
Absolutely, yeah. You have to want to talk to people to be an environmental educator, and most of the jobs in parks, if you like talking to people, if you're really social, they're a really good job for you.
So how has technology influenced your field in recent years? Are there any tools or technologies that you use on a regular basis?
Yeah, so a big one is this program right now. So when I started in the field of environmental education about 12 years ago, the idea that you would do a program without your participants being in the same physical space as you was like out of this world. But when COVID-19 happened, everybody shifted to doing virtual programs and learning to use tools like Zoom. With state parks, I use Microsoft Teams to do virtual programs, or if somebody requests to do a Zoom program, I do that as well. So that was a big shift in the industry towards technology. But we also use other types of technology on a daily basis. So I'm in charge of community science data collection in the park. So collecting data on park biodiversity, and I use different applications on my phone for that. So I have iNaturalist, which is used for any type of living things. So fungi, plants, insects, vertebrates. And then I also use an application called eBird, which is specifically to document and categorize bird species. And so when I'm out in the park, I'm typically running those applications as well, so that we can have a running catalog of data for what species are found in the park at what times of year. And that helps us prioritize conservation projects in the park as well. So that is probably the biggest one. I mean, the normal technology that you would run at any other office job as well. So I have email, things like that, that I also do pretty regularly. But the field technology is sort of the different stuff that you might have to get used to.
You also mentioned social media. So you don't have like a social media person per se that you just pass stuff off to. You pretty much have to take care of that yourself.
That's a great question. So it varies with state parks and with forestry. And Joe, I think you guys have your own page at Elk as well. Cinemahoning has its own page. So I'm technically in charge of running Cinemahoning's page, but DCNR does have their own social media page that they send out information on. And most state parks do not have their own pages. So it's kind of we're one of the lucky ones at Cinemahoning that we've got one. So that does fall on me, but not all state parks do. And I'm pretty sure DCNR has their own communications person in central office that Joe talked about that's responsible for that page. The DC Department of Conservation Natural Resources page. I would recommend following both of those pages. There's lots of cool stuff that gets posted there. But yes, social media is definitely a part of it. Actually, my last job at the Norman Bird Sanctuary, we did a lot with our social media, and we had a social media person, but a lot of times they worked with us on the messaging, the language, and also to collect the media that was posted there.
Right. So Joe, how about in your position, the technology that you've seen, advance in the recent years?
As Matt pointed out, the iPads, iPhones, they've been huge. We can take applications right out in the forest with us, as opposed to having paper maps now. We have our, GPS units. We have our iPhones that have maps downloaded on them. So, I mean, that's helped us with our surveying. Another big one that's really come on is drones. Our Forest Health Agency or sections, they have drones that they use for monitoring forest health. We actually started implementing them in our fire programs as well for observations during prescribed fires, and there's certain applications for being able to use this as ignition sources. There's a device that they can drop that actually helps us to set the fire where we need to fire during the prescribed fires. And then in the latter part, I know a lot of private industry uses drone more so for the silvicultural treatments and prescriptions. They can actually fly over an area. They can use those to calculate, essentially board foot, tree heights, the whole 9 yards. So technology is huge when it comes to forestry, and it's only increasing. On the mechanical side of things, I know we used to go from like traditional loggers that would fell trees. So a lot more of that is becoming mechanized, where they're actually sitting in a piece of equipment and cutting trees down. So it's a lot safer for them when we come to the harvesting side of things. So as a whole, I'd say the drones have really come on, and computer technology. I mentioned the GIS, GPS, that type of education or background is really getting pulled into the fold as far as when forestry is concerned.
It's really interesting. I would have never have thought about drones, but yeah, I'm sure moving forward, they are going to be very popular in some of those outdoor careers. I think students would really be attracted to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what are some current trends or innovations in your field? Like, how is your industry evolving, and what opportunities does this create for students who are seeking careers?
The big one we've talked about is recreation, not to step away from forestry, but forests essentially are a working industry. It's an area where we're not just managing the trees for a renewable resource, but I mentioned CO2 and carbon emissions. Forestry is huge when it comes to that, because we can actually capture that carbon It can be in a down woody debris. We could utilize the wood for products. Again, it traps that carbon that's normally being emitted. So forestry is huge in that aspect. So the recreation and getting people into the outdoors, that continues to be a huge push for us. More so, the traditional outdoors and recreational were the hunters and the fishers and people that trapped. But we're seeing this plethora of avenues and user groups. I mentioned bikes, hikers have been mentioned, horseback riders, e-bikes are huge now. They're coming on. I was just out hunting the last couple of weeks, and I probably saw 12, 13 different users on e-bikes trying to get back to where they wanted to hunt. So, I mean, when it comes to those type of activities, I think recreation is going to be the big push. ATV riders, snowmobile riders, those type of entities. That's going to be our big push down the road. I think is trying to pull what we can from the land bases that we manage. That's the other thing that I should bring up is not every square inch of state forest is good for ATVs. Not every square inch is good for mountain biking or hiking for that matter. So we have to, as managers, we're continually trying to figure out how to match the land base that we manage that's out there and available to the users and the demand and what they need. And then also balancing that with the ecosystem. Matt's been talking about birds and birding, but it's the wildlife and just the micro rhizies and whatnot that might be out there to keep everything functioning the way it's supposed to. So the recreation is going to be the biggest thing, I think, down the road.
Matt, I saw you shaking your head, and I know you had mentioned recreation. Is there any additional trends or, innovations that you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I know that with state parks, we're focusing more. We've always focused on recreation. I think that's a key distinction between the Bureau of Forestry, where Joe works, and the Bureau of State Parks, is that Joe and Forestry has a diverse range of goals that they're trying to accomplish that includes recreation. And like he just said, balancing ecosystems and forestry and healthy forests. Whereas the parks are really here for people. So our primary goal is providing a place for recreation. But a big shift in that thinking is that we're now trying to utilize the recreation opportunities at the park to really provide economic opportunities for local areas as well. So instead of just saying the park brings people in and that helps the local area, we're planning more events that bring larger groups of people in. So here at Cinemahoning, we have 2 different Women in the Wilds events, which kind of keys into another area of focus, which is working with groups of people who are not traditionally seen in the outdoor recreation field. So we have 2 different events that are women only. They're weekend long. Those events bring between 30 and 50 women into the park for the weekends, and we don't provide lodging. So they're staying at short-term lodging, hotels in the local community, and we don't provide all meals. So they're also utilizing local restaurants. And then the meals that we do provide, we're purchasing from local vendors, local restaurants that are coming in. And all of that sort of is lumped into this new idea that Secretary Dunn, the DCNR secretary, has talked about, which is the outdoor recreation economy. So showcasing that recreation is not just good for people and healthy, it's also good for local economies and local areas, and even folks who may not feel like they're directly involved with outdoor recreation, they may still be benefiting in one way or another. ATVs were a great mention from Joe. Here in the park, we have snowmobile paths, so we're all about multi-use. We don't actually allow wheeled ATVs, but we do allow snowmobiles in the park on the Lowlands Trail. And then in the summertime, that trail is for bicycles and walkers. So balancing those different recreational pursuits in the same areas, how do we do that? And then lastly, I'll mention on the school program side of things, which is a big part of my job here, there's been a shift in the last probably 15 years towards inquiry-based programming, which is a little bit of jargon. What that basically means is that we're trying to shift programming to allowing students to ask questions about what they find, and then having them explore those questions and see what kind of answers they find, rather than me just telling school children, this is this type of bird and it makes this kind of sound. Allowing students to go out and explore, find things that interest them, and then come back and explore those things in a way that's more meaningful. And Pennsylvania actually has new state science standards that are coming out. So State Parks is working with the Department of Education to provide structure for local teachers, because a lot of that style of programming is stuff that we're already doing here. So just providing a bridge between public and private schools and new science and technology standards and experiential education, which we're already doing.
Okay. They had to leave. There was a question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you feel there will be a increasing demand for forestry and forestry related careers?
I would say yes. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, we've seen a decline in the number of students that are coming out of the programs. When I went to school, we probably had class sizes of 30, maybe even 40 students. And I know I was told it was under 20, or if I'm correct, that they graduated out of one of the programs last year, it's kind of scary. So forestry is always going to be needed to manage the forest, whether it's private sector, national forest, state, or when I say state, Bureau of Forestry or Game Commission. So I think that's still going to be there. Students that are like juniors, seniors, and even sophomores at this time, I know the cohort of my peers that I work with, we all have about, I'm going to say anywhere from 8 to 10 years left, maybe 6 to 10 years left. So there'll be a slug of us at least leaving essentially state employment or government employment in the next 6 to 10 years. So again, we're going to need to fill with a new cohort coming in. I think the Game Commission, a lot of the private sectors in the same boat.
Okay. Counterpart, do you guys have any questions?
So like what are your daily tasks? Like how do you like fulfill those tasks and know when you accomplish them?
Who wants to take it?
You want me to go first, Matt? So honestly, we have a plan and agenda. We try to come in and do the work that we set up for that day. Unfortunately, sometimes we get thrown a curveball, whether we're requested to do something else. We might actually have a search if it's during hunting season or during when people are visiting. So automatically everything gets dropped and we start to set up search protocol for that individual or individuals. Other things that affect our daily work are forest fires. We're responsible for suppressing all wildfires in Pennsylvania. So if we get called or we get requested to go on a wildfire, again, all of our daily jobs drop. As Matt pointed out, our jobs are very diverse. Back when I was a forester, a forest technician, even as an assistant district forester, and now that I'm getting new clerical in the district, I hope to be able to get back out in the field. I could go out and brush a trail, walk a trail, blaze a trail. I could go out and help my staff put in a culvert pipe, fix a road, fix a trail, put in a new sign. I could go out with my foresters and mark timber or tally regeneration that's on the ground. So we have a diversity of things that we can do in the course of a day. I mentioned that we work with our sister agencies, Game Commission and Fish and Boat Commission. Sometimes our guys will go out and just help stock fish, or we'll go out when the bear biologist is in the area and we'll go out and they'll actually help them go out and we'll be able to hold bear cubs while they're doing their measurements and stuff on the female bear. So, I mean, our job is, again, when I was 8 years old, I realized what I wanted to do because it is so diverse. I'm not sitting in my office all the time staring at a computer. Our guys are out and about. If it's torrential downpours, there's office work to do. Or if they like to play in the rain, we can get out in the rain. If it's a beautiful day, we're out in the woods, doing what we can do. So that typical day varies. I can't really say it's this, and that's the day. A staff member a long time ago asked me, when's our work done? And he said, our work's almost done, right, for the season? And I said, our work's never done. It's just a revolving door. Essentially, we get one project done and we start another project, and then we just go to the next project. And that's what's nice about our profession is there's so much variation and so much variability. You don't get bored and you don't get stuck in a rut. It's not sitting in a factory, nothing against factory workers. But you're not just punching parts or counting all day long. So there's a lot of variability and you're out in nature. I mean, you can't, in my experience, you can't replace nature and just the solitude and the peace that it brings you.
All right,
Hopefully
thank
that
you.
answered your question.
I'll add a little bit to that too, like on that diversity of tasks throughout a regular day. How do we know that we're done? It really depends on the task. So if it's a program like this, it's easy to tell because Amy will end the meeting, we'll log out, and I'll know that it's finished and check that one off on my to-do list. But other things are much more free form. Especially there's a lot of things that I work on that take days or even weeks to accomplish. And so like a good example right now is that I'm in the process of planning for all my instructors for Women in the Wilds. And I've been working on that for almost a month. And so a little bit every day, I get an email back from somebody and confirm details and add them into the schedule. And hopefully it'll be done before that weekend gets here. And it usually is on plenty of time, but there's a lot of things. And like Joe said, there's some things that you never stop working on. So like looking at the biodiversity of the park, myself and Anna, our other educator who's seasonal, we're always going to be working on that. So it's never done. It's always going to be a part of our job. We may not work on it every day, but it's part of our job continuously. So things like that are much more out in the weeds, I guess. That's what I'd say.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, like what education does this career require? Like these careers, like what type of education do you need?
I can go first on this one, Joe, if that's all right. So it varies quite a bit. I would say in my private sector employment, every position I held required a 4-year bachelor's degree. But that's not the case with DCNR, at least with Bureau of State Parks. Technically, for my job, environmental education specialist, one of the requirements is a 4-year degree, but there's a or in that description. And you can also have 4 years of experience designing and teaching environmental education programming, and that negates the degree requirement. Now, to get that experience, you're going to need to start at an entry level, either as a resource ranger, which does not require any post-secondary education, or as an environmental interpretive technician that only requires a couple of credit hours in science. So you just have to balance the cost and benefits to you of the 4-year degree program, but you could just as easily wind up in my position with a 2-year associate's degree in wildlife biology, recreation, or even forestry. And you could also end up in my position without those college credits coming out of high school and going into that resource ranger position and gaining experience, because our resource ranger here at the park helps me with programs all the time. So she does our programming in the campground on Friday nights. So at a certain point, she's going to have 4 years of experience and she will be qualified to apply for jobs like mine. One thing I will say is that I do recommend trying to get some form of schooling in biology, wildlife, or natural resources. My high school, I went to Central Mountain High School. Those were offered at the high school level. So you could take wildlife and fisheries, forestry, and natural resource management in high school. And those classes are helpful because just like Joe said, I have to know a little bit about a lot of things. And so those classes would help with that. So the first thing I would do is, talk with your guidance counselor and find out if those classes are an option for you. And if they're not, and you don't want to do a 4-year degree program, look at places like Penn State Du Bois. They've got a great conservation biology, wildlife biology program. Less time, less money, could end up, leading to a career that somebody else might have went to school for 4 years like me to get, and you're not going to have as much debt. So.
Yeah, so when it comes to the forestry side of the shop, forest technician, which is a 2-year associate's degree. Again, Penn Tech down there in Williamsport. I know a lot of people from Coudersport that have graduated from there. I went to Montalto. I didn't know enough about Penn Tech back in the day, but I went down to Montalto, but I know family members that have graduated from Penn Tech with forestry. I know some of the recent graduates of Coudersport have gone there for their 2-year. That's focused mostly on the forestry side of the shop. That would be the minimum. Again, if you want to get your 4-year degree in forest management or one of the other operations in forestry, you can go down to Penn State or any of the other main colleges. The one thing I would say is, I know when I was in high school, I didn't really like public speaking or communication or English and those type of things. But I will say, if you're listening and watching this, force yourself to be uncomfortable. Force yourself to read more, be in English classes, do presentations, volunteer to do public speaking, even if it's a 5-minute clip, a 2-minute clip, maybe get into 10 or 15, just build upon it. I've been trying to tell all my kids that. I have one more left in school. It'll help you in the long run when you're doing interviews. It will help you at any job that you put in for, because you'll be comfortable speaking and interacting with people rather than the cell phone things that my kids kind of grew up with. So force yourself to be uncomfortable. I know everybody has their strengths, and lean on those strengths. So when it comes to your education, if you want to do it, there's mechanisms and ways to be able to do those things if that's your dream and want to do it. So sky's the limit.
All righty.
Do you have any other questions?
Can I add one more thing, Amy?
Yes.
I really liked what Joe was saying about public speaking as well. For any job in state parks, you're going to need to have that skill. Even our maintenance guys talk and interact with the public. So that's a really good one to try and develop. And I loved what Joe said about doing presentations, getting out of your comfort zone, even while you're in high school. That's great practice. And it's something that the resource ranger here at the park and I talk about a lot, and how she can improve the programming that she does is all about how to engage people in conversations. So that's a really important skill.
Do you guys know, are there employment opportunities for high school students within DCNR, or some summer, internship, like I guess for high school kids?
So the big one that comes to mind with high school is the newer program that we've had here at DCNR is the POC, Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps. I do not believe there is a crew out of Potter County or McKean County or anything up in that neck of the woods, but it would be something to reach out to DCNR. We could try to put you in contact with who our contacts are. These crews actually work within the state parks and in forestry if we have projects that we need. I know when it first kicked off, we had crews here several years in a row. High school students as well as adult crews, they came in and helped us with our trails, some of our routine maintenance, but we got them into some of the other avenues, timber marking, and some of the other things that were more career oriented. We tried to pull them into those things. I think DCNR is trying to work on a high school internship, don't quote me on that. Most of the internships I know in the past have at least been focused on someone that's in college, unfortunately. With that said, I will say that our district, and I know Coudersport District does it as well, job shadowing. If you're even remotely interested in, and I'll probably speak for Matt, sorry, Matt, but those of us that are in the field are willing, I believe, to open our doors to job shadowing. So you come with us for a day. We try to show you as much of what we do as we can to kind of open your eyes to what the possibilities are, so to speak. And if you enjoy that day and you can get another day, you know, there's nothing that says we can't do job shadowing a second day either. So that just helps to, again, I've told my kids that too, is get out there and see what's out there so that when you go to make that decision as to what your career choice might be, you kind of have a little bit of a background as to what's going on, not just these videos that we're doing, but actually on the ground, seeing what's happening.
Yeah, we also do job shadowing. I do it with members of the POC, Pennsylvania Outdoor Crew, and also with high school students. I have a note here that somebody had just called a high school student to set up job shadowing. So I usually handle that here in the park. That's a great way to get engaged. The POC crew locations, the closest ones is DuBois, which is the crew that Joe and I likely work with the most. There's also a crew in Williamsport, which I've worked with at another state park that I worked at. So those are great opportunities. The youth crew is the younger students, and then the adult crew is college age and even a little bit older than that. And those are great opportunities. And then specifically with Bureau of State Parks, we have the Conservation Volunteer Program. So I manage that here at the park with some help from our clerical staff in terms of setting up all of the park's volunteers. So we have a variety of projects that high school students can come and help with. We monitor and maintain like 30 bluebird boxes in the park. And by monitoring, we have to check them weekly for like 8 months a year. So we rely on volunteers to help with that because myself and Anna don't always have time to go out and check 30 bluebird boxes. So you can learn about data collection, surveying, things like that through a program like that. And I'm pitching that one because I need volunteers for the bluebird boxes. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, give me a call and we'll get you set up for this summer. But lots of other things as well. I have volunteers that do programs here. So we have Eagle and Elk Watch programs. If you're really passionate about those resources, I know a lot of the students who are going to listen to this have grown up in the elk range, you know a lot about elk. You can absolutely help us with elk watches, and that'll help you gain some experience with that public speaking as well. But lastly, I'll also say those volunteer opportunities are great opportunities to get you in the park, see what's available, but just being local really does give you a leg up in the application process. I can tell you for a fact here at Cinemahoning, and my wife worked here before I did as well, that they asked you in the interview about your level of comfort with working at a park that's so rural, because a lot of folks who are coming from other places don't stick around very long. So there is a lot of value to being a local person and applying to work at this park. And it's not just that you're used to the area, it's also that you know the roads, you can help people engage with the resources better, and you're likely pretty passionate about the resources that we have. So those are the best kind of candidates for jobs like mine. And just so we know it helps you in the process, just being from this area.
Yeah, that's great. All right, we're running out of time. Is there anything we didn't cover that you feel is important for the students to know?
I guess from my point is what I've learned in all the years that I've been employed is don't be afraid to try. If you're interested in something, seek it out. Again, we mentioned job shadowing, but don't be afraid to, if your teachers or people can help you get in for like college tours, if you're 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, if you know somebody from, I keep using Coudersport because that's where I was born and raised and whatnot. But if you know somebody that's going to school, maybe the teachers can help you reach out, or your parents can help you reach out to those universities and just go for a tour of the school. You know, see if that's actually what you want to do. You know, talk to those individuals that are involved as students, rather than people that are in those careers, and just get their perspective on things too. So the sky's the limit. I keep saying that, you know, if you can dream it, you can do it. So don't let anybody tell you differently. And those of you that might struggle with testing, as far as the SATs and all that, I went to school, I took the SATs and didn't do very good. But when I got to school, I was what was called on academic probation. I had to prove myself, and I did. So again, I didn't like taking tests, but I don't want that to deter you from trying to do your best, you know. Just put your best foot forward, and we're here to help you however we can. So
Great, thank you.
I'll echo what Joe said about the SATs. You know, I was never a straight A student. I did not do well on the SATs. And actually, you know, I didn't really do super well in school until I became a rec major and realized that I was going to do something that I was really passionate about. So, you know, you want to apply yourself and do the best you can, but really find something that you're really passionate about. And if you're really passionate about the outdoors, DCNR has a lot of options for really good careers. So I can't stress enough, you know, I studied in a field where a lot of people go in and work for the National Park Service or the National Forest Service. And I had the opportunity to travel, and I think that was really great. But DCNR is the best job I've had. So it's right here, you know, relatively close to my backyard. I took a couple of years to explore what was out there, and I landed right back where I came from. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Explore your options. Maybe you'll find something great out there, but also don't forget about, you know, North Central Pennsylvania. We have a lot to offer here.
Great advice. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. Great information for the students. And students, of course, you know, they're a great resource if you're looking for job shadowing or anything like that. Just get out into the woods, and certainly you guys can help them reach their goals. All right, so thanks for joining us for today.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate being here.
All right.
and I echo the same. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, students. Nice meeting everybody.